In this video, we'll create projectors to project shadows or lights down in a scene. We'll use projectors for a number of things in the Unity editor. We can use projectors to project down a shadow under an object, faking a shadow in. We can also use projectors to project in lighting or to project in patterns, much in the way we'd use a cookie in film or cinematic lighting. We might project down dappled leaf shadows or project in varied cloud shadows onto a scene. This is different than a cookie, as a cookie actually shapes a light, and we may want more indistinct shadows from a projector spread over the scene instead. The projector we'll create is a blob shadow we're going to use possibly under one of our characters. We need to import in a few standard assets for our projectors, as there are several special shaders we need to make them work. We also need to create an image, which we'll use Adobe Photoshop for. We'll start out by importing in the new shaders. Click on Assets in the top menu, Import Package, and Effects. The Effects package has a number of different things in it, ranging from image effects, effects for glass refraction, additional image effects scripts, shaders that we can use for anti-aliasing and bloom and flares, depth of field, and more. We'll scroll all the way down to Projectors. Click on the None button on the bottom of this dialog to clear off all the checkboxes. In Projectors, we can choose to either bring in the whole Projectors section or simply the shaders. If you'd like, check the whole Projectors section, as this will give you some prefabs for blob lights, blob shadows, and grids. Great examples of using projectors in the scene. These also come with their materials and their textures, so you can see the full workflow if you'd like to go further. I'll click Import, and this will import in the projector effects into my Unity editor. Under Standard Assets in the project window, go down under Projectors and into Shaders. The two shaders we're going to use are the Projector Light and Projector Multiply. These are special shaders for projectors that take in both a cookie and a fall-off and allow us to really sculpt the way that projector looks. Next, we'll create a spotlight for our projector, put a projector component on, and put on a material using one of these shaders. Choose Game Object, Light, and Spotlight to create a new spotlight in the scene. Pull it up on the Y-axis so it's up above the floor, and then add a projector component. In the inspector, clicking on Add Component, and under Effects, choose Projector. This added on an additional square cone on this light, denoting the size of that projected image. We can see in the projector component that it needs a material to function correctly. I'll go into the VFX folder and into Materials, and create a new material in here. These are the VFX materials we'll use later as part of our particle attacks. I'll drag down on the slider to reduce the size of the icons, right-click, and choose Create and Material. This will be a new standard material until we apply one of those shaders. With that material selected, I'll browse on the left side of the project window down under Standard Assets, Projectors, and Shaders, and then take the Projector Multiply shader and drag it into a blank spot on that material to change that shader. Now this new material has a standard Projector Multiply shader on it. In the Materials section of the VFX folder, make sure you name this new material. Right now it's called New Material. I'm going to change mine to Blob Shadow. This will be a blob shadow I'll use under a character. Now select the spotlight and drag this blob shadow material into that material slot, or use the circle select to go pick that material. It's now projecting over everything, as right now there's nothing in the shadow to tell it where to go and where not to go. We'll go into Adobe Photoshop and make an image to use as our shadow. Here in Photoshop, I've quickly painted a blob image. This image is 512 by 512 pixels. My thought is that I want this large in case I need a large shadow under a character, but I can always reduce its size down in Unity using the max size control on the image in the inspector. What I've also done here is to paint this shadow on a separate layer, leaving my white background alone. For this, I used a paintbrush, pressing B for brush, and then bringing up the size to roughly 200 with a hardness of around 14. I've got my foreground color set to deep blue and my background color set to black, and in the brush controls, I've used the color dynamics and scattering to scatter the look and color variance of this brush as I brush this shadow in. This gives me a good variety through, so it's not exactly the same color and simulates a little bit of light bounce in that shadow. I'll save this image out and import it into Unity and then attach it to that material. choosing File and Save As. I'll save this as blob PNG and put it in the Textures folder in the VFX folder in my Assets folder. Back here in Unity, Unity has imported in that image and we can put it in the material, but we need to configure how that image comes in first. Browse into the VFX Textures folder or wherever you save that image. I'll select that blob image, and what we can see is that initially it's regarded as a texture, as this is the default for a 3D project. I'll change the texture type over to Advanced, and in here, change the wrap mode to Clamp. Additionally, I'll check Border Bitmaps, and this will eliminate any odd line at the top of the light. I'll click Apply. If we need, say if we're dealing in a small character like our Zombie Toys games, we might reduce down this max size here to 256. Remember, it's always better to bring in larger images and let Unity reduce and compress them. This way we'll get a really optimal result. If you're working in mobile, you can also compress per platform, setting the defaults as needed. Now select that spotlight, which has that projector component on it. I'll roll up the light component so it's easier to see the projector. And then, that blob material shows up down below. We need to put that blob texture into the cookie section of this projector material. I'll click on Select here in the texture slot in that cookie, and in the Select Texture dialog type in BL, and that's enough of a string to find that blob texture. I'll add it in, and then close the Select Texture dialog, and we can see that that light is now projecting down that shadow. This is actually not lighting the scene. What we're seeing then is that this light is projecting down that image based on the size of that square cone, and also the near and far clip plane. We can change the aspect ratio if we need, widening out that projector. We can also change the field of view, making that cone wider or narrower overall. Lastly, we have a near and far clip plane, so we can specify that that projector stops at a certain point. If we bring this far clip plane down enough, we actually see that projector disappear. Right at about 14.8, it starts to appear again on the floor. And this is how we can use a projector to project down a detail or a shadow or a decal onto an object, but limit it from projecting onto others. Now I'll show an example of how this projector might be used. What we'll see often in games is that, especially in a stylized looking game, we'll project down a shadow under a character instead of allowing them to dynamically cast a shadow in the scene, as dynamic shadow casting is very computationally intensive, and often characters need a blobby shadow that approximates their shadow. I'll take my elephant model and drag it in as an example. I'll press F to frame in on that selection, and then move that projector down and under that elephant. I'll reselect this spotlight. Pull it down in the scene and over under the elephant. And pull it under so that it's just a bit of a shadow going on under that elephant. Then I'll increase out that field of view by dragging on the name field of view to widen out that shadow, making sure I pull it under to not shadow the elephant too much. Alternately, we can put that elephant on a new layer and then use the Ignore Layers dropdown to restrict this projector from actually hitting that elephant model. We can see though that this gives a nice darkness under, and it's actually approximating the shadow from that elephant, a good blob underneath, functioning somewhere between a shadow and a strong ambient occlusion. From here, what we might do then is to parent this spotlight under that character. As part of the character setup, we'll drag the spotlight onto that elephant model, so wherever the elephant model goes, the shadow goes with and approximates what we'd expect to see in a shadow. This is a terrific use of a projector to help optimize shadows on objects that need something going on but not a definite shadow. It also helps keep our calculation time down because we're not actually shadowing anything at all. We're projecting down an image. If you'd like to experiment further, try making a shadow of leaves and then projecting it over the scene, or try making larger blobs and projecting cloud shadows down, changing the mood and varying the lighting apparently of the scene without actually contributing any more lighting and shadow. Projectors are highly useful in a scene for allowing us to project both decals and shadows and light across multiple objects without changing their lighting.